In an effort to maintain global hegemony, its economy, and reserve states of the US dollar, the US believes it must damage China's relations with the rest of the world and destroy some of its productive capacity in the process. In my previous video titled Why the US Wants a War with China, I discussed exactly why I believe the USA want to start a war with China. If you've not seen that video, there'll be a link at the top of the screen and in the video description. And in this video, I'm going to discuss how I believe the USA plan to provoke China into this war. So let's get started. The failure of Trump's 2017 China tariffs demonstrated that unilateral actions are ineffective. The US must instead create a pretext for multilateral bullying. So the US will do what it has done many times before in every other campaign of overt aggression: manufacture lies and false flag events. Since 1947, the government of China has maintained that China will seek peaceful reunification with Taiwan, no matter how long it takes. During a 1984 speech, Deng Xiaoping, the president of China at the time, said, "If it cannot be accomplished in 100 years, it will be in 1,000 years. Forced unification would only be pursued if China's sovereignty was under imminent threat. So what would be such a threat? In short, a clear violation of the One China principle, such as Taiwan moving towards secession. As such, if Taiwan could be pushed into holding an independence referendum, China would almost certainly move rapidly towards forced reunification." Now, just for clarity here, I want to point out that Taiwan is part of China. This is recognised by Taiwan, international law, and even the USA. Although you wouldn't think so the way they behave, their words and actions seem very opposing. Here is an extract from the joint communique issued during Richard Nixon's visit to Shanghai in 1972. The United States acknowledges that all Chinese on either side of the Taiwan Straits maintain there is but one China, and that Taiwan is part of China. The United States government does not challenge that position. It reaffirms its interest in a peaceful settlement of the Taiwan question by the Chinese themselves. With this prospect in mind, it affirms the ultimate objective of the withdrawal of all US forces and military installations from Taiwan. Currently, there are no indications that either of Taiwan's two political parties have any intention of holding such a referendum, and it's unlikely they would have support from the public even if they did. In a poll published by the Taipei Times in November 2021, 84.9% said they supported maintaining the status quo between Taiwan and China, while only 8.6% said that Taiwan should declare independence as soon as possible. How then does the US intend to push Taiwan in this direction? The current US strategy appears to be salami slicing towards China's red line by funneling more and more military hardware onto the island of Taiwan until China forces reunification. A quote from a report produced in January 2023 by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, a prominent US think tank, stated, "Once conflict begins, Taiwan's isolation means that there can be no Ukraine model. Therefore, all equipment and munitions that Taiwan needs to fight the war must arrive before China begins combat operations." The total value of US arms sales to Taiwan is estimated to be in the tens of billions of dollars and includes such advanced equipment as F-16 fighter jets, M1 Abrams tanks, and precision-guided missiles. Even as recently as a few weeks ago, it was reported that the US have approved another sale of weapons to Taiwan totaling $619 million US. The US military complex must be rubbing their hands together in glee. It's also not hard to imagine the US further escalating the situation by manufacturing a military incident in the Taiwan Strait. However, neither strategy is likely to get the support of the Taiwanese population for war. One possible theory, and I stress this is only a theory, to gain broad Taiwan support for an independence referendum, may be to launch a wide-scale cyber attack on the island's power grid that could feasibly be blamed on the mainland. The number of cyber attacks on Taiwan's grid has increased significantly over the past few years. And while these attacks have yet to result in serious outages, they could indicate the grid is being probed for a weakness as a prelude to a much bigger attack. Such an attack would generate a huge amount of atrocity propaganda, since Western audiences have already been heavily primed to reflexively assume any cyber attack on Taiwan must have originated from the mainland. The US has always been quick to pin recent high-profile cyber attacks on Iran, China and Russia. However, the US itself has an extensive history of using cyber attacks to target civilian infrastructure in other countries. And in 2017, WikiLeaks revealed the CIA had developed a suite of hacking tools called Vault 7. One of the tools, known as Marbles, is specifically designed to mislead forensic investigators into incorrectly attributing the origins of cyber attacks. However, in contrast to this cyber attack theory, if China was indeed considering forced unification with Taiwan, there'd be no reason to forewarn the island of an imminent invasion with a cyber attack. The PLA could simply blockade the island, starving it of fossil fuels, which its grid is almost entirely dependent on. If Taiwan's power grid went down, Taiwanese officials would quickly blame the mainland for the attack, which, if severe enough, would likely cause a rise in anti-China sentiment. And at this point, Taipei, with coercion from the US, could initiate a call for independence. And if it did, China would see that as a challenge to its territorial integrity and would very likely begin the process of forced reunification. Depending on what form this took, the US would then have the pretense it needs to trigger its obligations under the Taiwan Relations Act. In preparation for this, both US political parties are fighting for the most virulently anti-China stance, in much the same way that Russiagate laid the groundwork for the US proxy war in Ukraine. The recent amount of yellow peril fear-mongering has paved the way for an attack on China. But is the US really readying itself for direct confrontation with China when even the USA's most optimistic military simulations show that engaging in a conventional head-to-head war against China at best would probably end in neither side winning outright? According to a report by the think tank, the RAND Institution, the US economy would indeed suffer as a consequence of war with China. However, they predict China's economy would suffer more damage and would set China back by as much as 2 or 3 decades. And here is another quote for the Center for Strategic and International Studies from one of their war simulation models. The United States and its allies lost dozens of ships, hundreds of aircraft and tens of thousands of servicemen. Taiwan saw its economy devastated. Further, the high losses damaged the US's global position for many years. The US has no appetite for sending its soldiers into war. Instead, the US prefers to push proxy states forward into confrontation while continuing to supply weapons from the back, just like they are currently doing in Ukraine, supplying both large amounts of money and weapons without any risk to American soldiers' lives. These plans have manifested in the recent US attempts to establish an Asia-Pacific NATO, along with anti-China alliances like AUKUS or the Quad Plus, which appear to be little more than mechanisms for foreign taxpayers' money to be funneled to US weapons manufacturers. Take Australia for example. They have just committed up to $368 billion of taxpayers' money to a fleet of nuclear submarines that won't even arrive till 2040, and are apparently to counter the threat from China. However, there is no identifiable threat to Australia from China whatsoever. If you follow Australian media though, you would think that Australia faces an imminent invasion from China. I cannot help but think a lot of this hysteria has been created by the USA. China buys a huge amount of raw materials from Australia, including iron ore, coal and liquefied natural gas. China accounts for more than 30% of Australia's total exports. China needs these resources for its development. So why would China attack one of their largest suppliers? It makes no sense at all. Paul Keating, the former Prime Minister of Australia, has been very critical of the AUKUS deal and has said, "It's the worst deal in all history." Additionally, Indonesia and Malaysia have also been very critical of the deal, saying that it could prompt a regional arms race, and have both said that they will not allow nuclear-powered submarines to operate in their waters. It's no surprise at all that of all the US client states in the region, Japan appears the most eager to act as a forward operating base for the USA. While Article 9 of Japan's constitution both renounces the right to threaten or wage war, Japan is now building an offensive arsenal at a pace not seen since World War II, committing as much as $320 billion to buy missiles capable of striking China, and readying itself for a conflict. And again, I'm sure a large proportion of that money will end up in the hands of the US military-industrial complex. Efforts are also underway to bring Thailand, India and the Philippines on board with the attack. Since the election of Marcos Jr. in May of last year, the Philippines has agreed under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement to allow the USA to build new military bases around the Philippines, including one in a province facing the South China Sea. In my opinion, this is a very foolish move on the behalf of the Philippines, as around 34% of their exports and 37% of their imports are with China, if you include Hong Kong, far in excess of what their imports and exports are with the USA. However, you have to remember that the Philippines are somewhat a vassal state of the USA, and I guess if Marcos Jr. had not agreed to the USA's demands, he may have found himself pushed from power and replaced with someone who was more sympathetic to hosting the US military bases. Qin Gang, the Chinese foreign minister, recently said in a speech he gave in Washington, "If the US does not hit the brakes but continue to speed down the wrong path, no amount of guardrails can prevent derailing, and there will surely be conflict and confrontation." Speculation around exactly how the US intends to pull China into war is unclear. However, we have likely already crossed the point beyond which a major military offensive by the US and its vassals is inevitable. The question is, will it work? And that's a question I will be answering in my next video, so stay tuned. I would love to hear what your thoughts are, so leave a comment in the comments section. If you like this video and found it informative, please hit the like button and share it with your family and friends. If you would like to support my work, you can buy me a coffee. The link is in the description below the video. However, as always, for now, take care.